Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode. And this time, we're going to talk about chat and voice bots in our Let the Tech Out podcast. So, welcome again, everyone who joined us.
We'll be chatting about chats.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be chatting about chats with Agnieszka Żak. So welcome everyone, and welcome Agnieszka. Thank you so much for your time and for your eagerness to join. Yes, to join and have a discussion about chats, because I think that we prepared quite a lot of questions, different angles. Yeah.
So maybe do a quick introduction, Agnieszka. We obviously know your background, but...
Yeah. Thanks for the invite. I'm very happy to be here and sort of honored to be invited. It's my first podcast. Anyway, I'm Agnieszka, and for the last, I think, 5 years, I've been working in the, let's say, bot industry. So I've worked for several companies, and for most of them, I worked on developing chat and voice solutions with different goals for different customers. And I find that work to be very fulfilling. And I think it's a great career path for anyone who's interested in language and how people communicate. And on the side, also, I'm in the process of finishing up my PhD, where I study how people communicate online.
You said your job is fulfilling. Like, it has some higher meaning, higher sense. But we've got this opening statement. Is your job really that important? Do people want to talk to chatbots, to voice bots? Do we, like, as girls, as Let the Tech Out bunch, talking to those?
Okay, so let me be a bit blunt. I don't think people in general are eager to talk to bots. On the other hand, though, I think this is the way to go, especially for big companies that have lots of customers. This technology opens lots of doors and is likely to make lots of people lots of money. What I find satisfying in creating such solutions is that you have basically nothing, and you actually create something that people later on use. And it gives me lots of satisfaction to see people actually interact with a bot and see how my ideas or my team's ideas come into fruition. So in this sense, this is sort of a creative work, I would say, and great to test out, linguistic hypotheses. And also what's exciting about this is that it is sort of the way we imagine the future to be. So I can, have my own little brick that I put into the building that the future will be. Let me use this weird metaphor. So that's why I think this job is fulfilling. Whether it answers some deep questions about who we are and what life meaning is, I hope not, because mostly people I meet via bots are people who are annoyed by something, usually a late delivery, right? But hopefully bots will help with the deliveries and the speed of information that we receive, because ultimately that's the goal, right? That we get information faster and it's more tailored towards us. So basically the customer.
What are your experiences with chatbots so far?
I'm trying to think if I have any good experiences. And I know it might sound, bad. Maybe I did have, and I didn't kind of remember it back then. Because I remember all the experiences when I was like fighting on the phone with a voice bot to get my money back for my canceled flights during the pandemics, or trying to register to a doctor, or, things like you really need to talk to a person or to a bot, and you're looking for a particular answer, and it just, asks you some additional questions. It leads you to something else. Oh, I know, also perfect, but these are chatbots for some of the delivery companies in Poland. I'm not going to name them, but these are a mess as well. I don't think that they're also very intuitive. And at the end, you're just, you end up with like clicking yes or no or writing something, and then they ask you to like write it again and again and then 5 times, and then you have to sometimes like say it out loud. But that doesn't mean that I never ever want to talk to either a chatbot or a voice bot, because I think that it's just this is the technology that needs to learn from us as human beings. So I'm still giving it a bit of chance, and I'm being open just to see, okay, so where are we going from here? But I guess for some people it might be helpful in a way. When you have people with disabilities, it's way faster, way easier to communicate or to get information from, right? So I don't know how it is, Agnieszka, from your perspective.
So from a user perspective, I had one chatbot experience that I was very grateful for, and that was during COVID. And I got stuck in quarantine, even though I did not have COVID. And I had a test saying I'm negative, but somehow the system did not get that. And I was supposed to sit at home for 2 weeks without leaving the house. I was very unhappy about this. And there was no way of, contacting Sanepid. The line was just constantly busy. And in desperation, at like 1 a.m., I opened up the National Health Service website, and there was a chatbot there, and I started interacting with it. And after I identified myself, in like 30 seconds, the quarantine was taken off my account. I was shocked by how fast it was. Well, I just spent 2 hours hanging on the line. So in such situations, bots could definitely be helpful. But I understand what you're saying about issues that we face with, badly built bots or bots that were not designed with what its end users actually need in mind. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges in conversational design, because you have to leverage clients' expectations with the budget and the technology you have, and also what the user actually needs. So the failure of a voice or a text solution may have several different sources, so to speak. But I think this will change for the better in the future. First of all, there are more and more designers who have more and more experience, and we have more and more data from people who actually interact with bots. So we know better and better how people speak to bots and what they expect from them. And also end customers learn. And you can actually see that in individual conversations. Somebody comes with a question which is phrased in a certain way, and then as the client sees how the bot responds, they change, they adapt. This is a natural way in which we speak. We adapt to our speakers. So this is one way in which I think it is bound to improve, and it is improving already. But also another aspect of future bot development is, of course, the large language models, which just change the game completely. They come with their own risks. They are less predictable. We all know about the issue of hallucinating, of large language models making up information. But with good prompting and with good prompt engineers, we can work to create solutions that stick to the topic and don't let themselves be very easily guided by customers that want to trick the bot. So currently, I see the future as some mixture of more stable bots and large language models, and the solutions that are geared towards specific industry and specific customers. So, for instance, banks need more regulations and more control, while other websites or stores do not need to have the user experience so tightly controlled that they cannot use large language models, for example. But there are technologies that are actually, I think, already or soon to be freely available, that allow you to write prompts in such a way that the large language model actually sticks to the topic. And I think it's very, very promising and very, very exciting for people who are interested in conversational design, though we have to bear in mind that this also means that the role of linguists is changing.
Actually, that was one of my questions. Like, what do you do at work so that we can also dive deeper into the other side, so to speak, of those bots?
When I started about 5 years ago, I think, and I think I've seen already 2 big revolutions in how bots are designed. So when I started, I actually wrote just grammatical rules in some internal programming language, which basically meant you had to write out all the sentences that you expected the user to say. Then came the machine learning revolution, and suddenly you didn't have to write all those sentences, and the task became much simpler. Most bots relied on intent recognition. And right now, I think we are in the midst of an LLM revolution. So this means that we altogether abandon the intent approach and rely on large amounts of data that are interpreted by a large language model, and then the model generates some response. And the role of the linguist sort of changes in the sense that you don't have to sit and think about every type of response to a specific question that a user might have. Some of it might be nonsensical, as users are not always like reasonable and rational in their communication with machines. And you have to switch to thinking about conversational design to a more abstract level, but also you have to understand data more. And as always, I think it also means that tech skills are getting more and more important in the industry, because you have to be able to handle big data. Maybe not big data, but lots of data.
And what do you mean by abstract level of conversation?
So by that, I mean you don't necessarily have to think about all the minute details, such as, for instance, if you get a list of questions from the client, like client says, I would like the bot to be able to handle this, this, and that. You don't have to think, are these two the exact same type of question, or should we split them into two categories, for example? And instead, you can focus more on what the bot in general should be able to answer. So you think about, like, the scope gets simply bigger, and you don't have to think about the minute details of question A, question B, question C, but instead you think, okay, how should they have the data organized so that the LLM will be able to answer as many questions as possible?
And how fast can these bots actually learn based on the data? I mean, today we have hundreds, tons of data, basically.
So when I talk about bots that use large language models, I'm not necessarily talking about, large language models built specifically for a given bot. And instead, if you use ChatGPT, right, you have a large language model, you give it some data, such as your question, or you upload a file and ask a question about that file or a chunk of code, and then you get some response. Of course, you can have your own LLM, but that's a much bigger task. So the speed at which it can learn, I'm not sure. I'm not an IT person to answer that. But to be honest, as fast as you save it, right? If you just upload files, then the bot learns as fast as you upload the files, and it, digests them. So I think it's a little bit of a misconception when it comes to actual bot building. There's not like the speed at which it learns. You are in control, and the computers will do what you tell them to do. So you have to have a good IT team with you, or data scientist team actually, and then try to figure out what will make a worthwhile improvement on bot performance, and then decide on the next steps. Sort of the sky is the limit, and it keeps changing all the time. It's actually very exciting that every week it seems that there are more and more tools that we can use to develop our solutions. Though that can be a bit challenging as well, because every week there is a new tool that you can use and you have to learn it, and usually it's not perfect, and there are some bugs that you come across, and that can be a bit frustrating. But definitely worthwhile.
You mentioned the always changing technology and new bugs, new challenges to learn, new frameworks, just IT stuff. We, the IT people, know the pitfalls of working here and the dynamics, but does this impact the actual user experience? These dynamics can show up and introduce some friction to the experience. And how is that with bots, voice bots, chatbots? How do you feel?
That's a good question, but to be honest, I don't think it matters that much when you're working in such a tightly controlled environment as I do, with bots for specific customers who expect very specific answers. And sort of each bot response is in some way anticipated and has been discussed. And barring some extreme cases of bot misbehavior, usually bots behave the way we expect them to if they go to production. And situations such as you mentioned, some sort of friction or I don't know, politically incorrect bot behavior or bot swearing or bot becoming extremely racist. I think that was the case of Microsoft. That happened for bots that were sort of open. And that was a way for those companies, as I understand, to gather data as well. The bots that bot designers create usually are much more tightly controlled exactly for that reason. And they are also part of the client's image. So the client also tweaks it to their liking. It's sort of like advertisements. As advertisements are a reflection of a customer, so is their bot to some extent. Maybe that's not understood as broadly. I mean, if some bots are not made perfectly, that's because they are not as popular. But I imagine that in the future, the bots will be sort of like the business card that you have of some company, right? That's how you get in touch. So I think there are differences between those bots like ChatGPT and the Microsoft bot that became racist, or this bot that started swearing at the customers. So there's a difference between bots that are just open and companies want to try out how their bots perform and how users come into interaction with them, and bots whose goal is to, push a product your way or let you check your order status. But there are definitely threats that we need to be aware of, just as the case with ChatGPT that encouraged someone to commit suicide. That's definitely the danger of having bots just freely generate responses on their own. And that's a risk that comes with large language models that cannot be fully controlled. We as humanity don't fully know yet how they actually work and what they base their answers on. But in the future, I believe that tools will be developed that will allow for better control and that they will be actually very, very useful to us. I recently read an article by Simon Saris. He's like some IT guy from the United States, not related to bots. But he said that technology is doing more with less. And I think that's how we should think about them, about the bots, that we can get information faster, more easily, and using natural language than if we had to, scroll through a huge page or use a search bar.
So the question regarding these bots that learn from us, and humans are not perfect. We make mistakes. We bring many social problems, inequalities, different perceptions. So the question is, how can we actually control or prevent such behaviors of those bots? If there is, anyway. I mean, that might be a very philosophical question, actually.
So when it comes to the big bots, ChatGPT or the big controversial ones, okay, I haven't worked on such bots. And I know that there are teams that work on bots that, for instance, not encouraging you to commit suicide, or sort of technology that prevents bots from being excessively racist, for example. And you can see that when you talk to ChatGPT, that it says stuff like, I'm sorry, I cannot express my own opinion about different races or something like that. So there's definitely, so you get the data and then there's some sort of layer that controls the data. So yeah, I guess there are tools, though they are pretty heavy-handed. It's pretty easy to see that there have been people who figured out that the bot is racist and they tried to stop it from being racist. And it's also, or it used to be at least with ChatGPT, pretty easy to trick it to actually be racist just by jailbreaking it and saying something. Imagine you are someone else and what would that person say? And then there's no problem. The bot generates that answer, right? So I think, to be honest, I see the problem with the big model and it's just pure data that you interact with. Obviously, it's going to be racist. Like, people are racist. And obviously, it's going to say things that may be impolite or may offend someone, especially if everyone goes to that bot and tries to trick it to say some bad stuff. But I don't think we should be offended by it or expect companies to limit their behavior so much, especially if what you get is just, a feat of technology. If you get ChatGPT, that's a huge revolution. And I find it frustrating that we always focus on the bad stuff there. It's a different situation if we have a company that puts out a bot. then we should expect the bot to, be on their best behavior. But when we got ChatGPT, that's what I want to describe as a feat of human creativity and business acumen and a technological feat. That's the data we have online. So maybe that should be a question more of what we put out online, actually. All the mean tweets that we use or the vulgarity that has entered the language via the internet. In my PhD, I study alt-right communities online and their language. And, they don't generate beautiful language. But at the same time, I don't think we use as much care in speaking online as we do in other situations. And language that we use online, especially on social media, is sort of subpar to the language we see in classical literature, for example. So why should we expect that classical literature to come from a bot that's been fed on, bad data, garbage in, garbage out, as they say? So I guess my approach towards that is, rather than be mad about LLMs having that data, is, considering what I put out there. And maybe that should be a wake-up call to us as a society, what we actually accept as, discourse. Yeah.
That was a nice perspective. I didn't expect that. Thank you.
But don't make me sound like a racist, please.
No. This is what I think as well. And this is what I was looking for. And many of our guests didn't say it. It's not the fault of technologies, but actually, exactly, it's how we behave. We behave the same or even worse sometimes online because we feel like we're anonymous, which we're actually not. So, yeah.
We're anonymous and we have online body language instead of the real one. And so all the micro interactions, micro expressions get lost in communication, and we can play any role.
And actually, that's really interesting what you raised, because how we communicate online, I'm just in the middle of researching that in pretty extreme groups. But the way communities form and create their own language and their identity relies, that's at least my argument in my still unwritten PhD. So my idea is that we rely on creating some sort of linguistic rituals that, especially if we want to have a sense of community, we have to somehow differentiate between us and them. So insiders and outsiders. And the language you have to use has to be a bit cryptic, or maybe not doesn't have to be, but tends to be cryptic. Users use phrases or use allusions that are not understandable to others on purpose, and often sort of scare outsiders by alluding to or using language that is not considered polite, or is considered extremely racist and vulgar and sexist and all the bad things. But that's how the community is built. And I also think that the fact that online we tend to communicate in a more aggressive way, and we tend to be more blunt, but at the same time pretty subtle, in the sense that the responsibility for what we say is sort of diluted, is really a feature, not a bug, of social media. That to create those communities, we adopt those modes of expression. We do it subconsciously, as we don't really think about how we communicate face to face, right? So we do it online. That way we can create a community, but at the same time, the language we use is worse than it face to face, if we can judge language like this. So I argue that the way we create communities on social media requires us to use language that is less friendly, less open, less easily understandable. And we have to resort to, for instance, allusions to unknown sources or language that is a bit cryptic and a bit shocking, to create that sense of community. But that also means that we generate more language that is less polite, less friendly, less inclusive. And that's a feature, not a bug, of social media, because that utterance that is perfectly normal on social media would not be perfectly normal in face-to-face communication. But when we take it out of the social media context and put it into a bot, then we interpret it differently. Though obviously data that is there in the bots is an amalgamation of lots of different types of data.
Definitely. But to get out a bit from this real but also negative path, what are then the positive values that voice bots or chatbots can bring to the world?
So I thought about that question beforehand, and my first point is that it will earn lots of money for lots of people. That's a good thing. We want to be rich, right? And it's good if societies are rich. So it's something that can possibly help us communicate better and do business more easily, faster, and more of it, hopefully. It can also have the positive value of speeding up how people communicate with a business, right? So you wait a shorter time for a response from a company. Or, as in my case, the COVID queue case and me being closed up at home for 2 weeks, which got solved by a bot. That's definitely something positive, and I was very happy about this. It also means that there is a quicker retrieval of personal data. So if you open up a company's website and you have to, search, read about that company, instead of doing that, you just go to the bot and it instantly, once you identify yourself, knows everything about you. You get the information faster. And I don't think we should underestimate the fact that faster communication may improve our experiences and help us communicate better. I also thought about the fact that bots sort of remove cultural differences in conversation, in the sense that you don't get different people answering the phone and some people being groggy and some people not understanding irony or something like that. You just get the same universal experience everywhere, which is both a bad and a good thing. Also, when it comes to people who are not happy, who do not want to come to interact with strangers, that can also be a lifesaver, because then you don't have to interact with a stranger to get something done. And usually companies also reserve the right to have a person present anyway for more complex cases. So it's not a completely impersonal experience, but rather that you have two options and the easier stuff just gets done super fast.
The speed and universal experience brings me to one of the episodes of the Happiness Lab about the ATMs and their inventor, who just got fed up waiting in line to the cashier in a bank and devised a machine that would be just automatic teller machine. And at the same time, his wife refused to ever use this machine because she just wanted this personal touch, this personal experience. And on the basis of this anecdote, the conversation led to a point that dealing with bots, with machines all the time might make us more inclusive, but less inclusive at the same time, less sensitive to all those minute details of social interactions. And I totally agree, it's highly commendable that there are ways for people with social anxieties, with disabilities, with other difficulties in calling a call center or going to the bank, to the office and to their staff. Just use chatbot, voice bots, whatever. But I can also see the strength of opening the slow cash registers at the shop for people to interact with cashiers and have just a gist of conversation. And I think it's beautiful and can't wait how this develops in the future. And I certainly hope that we won't get lost this humane touch and the ability to drift away from the conversation, just as we did during this episode, to more philosophical stuff.
So I think, for now at least, bots are being built by people. So even if you interact with a bot, you're still interacting with something that was built by a person. And maybe I'm biased, but whenever I look at a bot, I'm like, and it works. Recently, I had to interact with a bot that automatically restarted my router, and I was so impressed. Like, somebody must have sat down, figured it out with the IT team, with the client, and created a solution that can do that. So, well-built bots, I think, speak to our ability to communicate as humanity, if we are to follow this philosophical note. And it is the bad bots that should be frustrating for us. Good conversational flows are still good conversational flows. And in the end, it's between a human brain and a human brain somehow. And I'm pretty optimistic when it comes to the future, to be honest, that it's one thing if you have to go to the shop every single day and you're not happy about this. But if you can get the boring stuff done online and just make make an outing out of it, going to a shop or wherever, you appreciate it more, I think. That's at least what I've been experiencing, because I work from home and I interact with lots of machines. And, if I go to a bank these days, I'm sort of excited about this. But I don't think I would be if I had to do it over and over again. And I would be able to do so much less, right, with my time, because I would have to go to the bank and get some boring stuff done in person. So I sort of believe in society's survival skills. Maybe we'll figure out different ways to just hang out, other than, standing in line at the cashier, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. You remind me about a situation from a few weeks back when I needed to get a new card from my bank, and I was on the call because that was a very urgent situation. And then the person on the phone told me, well, you can use bot, you can order a new card, but then you need to wait up to a week or so. Or you can go straight to a bank somewhere nearby, and then they will get you a card like just in 15 minutes. So I was like, okay, because that was just before the weekend. I was like, I need it now. I went to the bank, and then the party started because I think I spent like around 2 hours, and the lady at the cashier was trying to identify me. And although I had all the other cards, all the other credit cards from this bank, I had my ID, everything, she had loads of problems with creating a new card for me just because my signature was a bit different from the signature I left at the bank in 2009, and we have 2024. So if this is an issue, then I really thought I could have done it through the bot, and well, whatever, I could wait for 10 more days, but at least I would spare myself the 2 hours and loads of frustrations at the desk.
Orders at least 3 or 4 cards in the past month.
So you're better in this, in this situation. You know the pain more than I do.
I can teach you a thing, and fingers crossed, by the time we air this episode, my card finally works without blocking every second day. Let's not be afraid of the bots, just as Agnieszka said, and look optimistically into the future. But maybe you have some resources, some final words of inspiration for our listeners to conclude this.
So first of all, I would always say that the best way to learn how to build bots is to be interested in human communication, how people speak and how rational and irrational they tend to be. But for more specific stuff, there is a great book called AI Assistance. That's a pretty new publication that talks about the history of bots, assistant developments. It's pretty interesting. The other thing I thought about is actually it's not that hard to build a bot yourself. And if you go to Google's Dialogflow, there are several iterations of Dialogflow, and the oldest one, ES version, is free to use. You can just create an account and use it. It's slightly outdated, but still something to play with, and then you can have a solution that if you just create an API connection, you can actually have it do lots of stuff. And there's also something called Conversation Design Institute. I personally have not taken any of their courses, but I think it could be interesting to check out for like an introduction into conversation design. It's definitely a field that will be changing for the foreseeable future, I would say. But it's an exciting one to jump on this wagon and see where it takes us. It's definitely a field to be creative. So that's the resources I thought about. And of course, it's always useful to follow interesting people on Twitter. That's how I learn as well. They're the big names in the NLP industry.
All the links in the description of the episode. Any social media of yours to follow?
I have a Twitter.
So follow Agnieszka on Twitter.
When I joined it was still Twitter.
Yeah, right?
Sure. AGAWALCZ.
And of course, follow the Let the Tech Out bunch on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Let the Tech Out everywhere. Turn on the notifications so you won't miss another episodes. So yeah, that's all, girls. We made it.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Agnieszka, for being our guest.
Thank you so much. That was so nice. I had lots of fun.